I was parked in my driveway at 2:14 a.m., gripping the steering wheel of a car that cost more than my father made in a decade. The engine was off. The house was dark, and inside, my perfect life was waiting for me. I had the job, the status, the network, and the bank account. By every metric of the Western world, I had won the game. But sitting there in the silence, I felt like I was drowning. It wasn't sadness. It was something far more terrifying. It was the realization that I had reached the mountaintop, looked around, and found absolutely nothing there. I had spent 30 years chasing the next dopamine hit, the promotion, the relationship, the validation, and every time I got it, the satisfaction evaporated faster than the time before. I was running on a treadmill that was moving too fast, fueled by espresso and anxiety, terrified that if I stopped, I'd have to face the fact that I didn't know why I was running in the first place. I wasn't a religious guy. To me, religion was a crutch for people who couldn't handle reality. I was a man of science, of logic. If I couldn't measure it, weigh it, or put it in a spreadsheet, it didn't exist. Islam, specifically, was at the bottom of my list. Actually, it wasn't even on the list. My perception of Islam was a collage of angry news headlines, misconceptions about oppression, and a general belief that it was backward. I thought it was a cult of rules designed to stifle human freedom. But the universe has a funny way of humbling you. My journey didn't start with a tragedy. It started with an intellectual challenge. I stumbled upon a debate online. It wasn't a preacher screaming about hellfire. It was a calm, rational discussion about the necessity of a creator. The argument wasn't based on feelings. It was based on cause and effect. The speaker argued that the complexity of the universe, the fine-tuning of gravity, the distance of the sun, the code within our DNA could not be the result of random chaos. For the first time, my atheism felt lazy. I realized I hadn't rejected God because I had proof he didn't exist. I rejected him because it was convenient. If there is no God, I am the God of my own life. I make the rules. That arrogance was comfortable. I decided to run an experiment. I would approach religion the same way I approached a business problem. Due diligence. I wanted to prove it wrong so I could go back to my life without this nagging question mark. I bought a Quran, fully expecting to find a book of fairy tales or contradictions. I grabbed a red pen, ready to tear it apart. I opened it, and the first thing that hit me was the tone. It wasn't apologetic. It didn't say, "Please believe me." It said, "This is the book about which there is no doubt." It challenged the reader directly. Produce your proof if you're truthful. Do they not reflect? Have you not seen? It was speaking to my intellect, not bypassing it. I read about the description of the embryo in the womb, detailed accurately centuries before microscopes existed. I read about the expansion of the universe, described as the widening of the heavens, a concept modern astrophysics only confirmed recently. I tried to find the scientific error that would let me dismiss the whole thing. I couldn't find it, but it wasn't the science that broke me. It was the theology. I came across the concept of Tawheed, absolute oneness of God. No partners, no sons, no intermediaries, just the creator and the creation. It was so sharp, so clean. It cut through the confusion I had seen in other faiths. It made sense that the source of all existence would be singular, infinite, and unlike anything in the universe he created. 4 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the sarcastic, secular corporate guy. By night, I was consuming lectures, reading tafsir exegesis, and fighting a war inside my head. My logic was convinced, but my ego was fighting for its life. I knew that if this was the truth, I had to submit, and I hated the word submit. I was a Western man. I valued independence above all else. I didn't want to pray 5 times a day. I didn't want to stop drinking. I didn't want to change how I dressed or how I spoke. I was afraid of losing my identity. I was afraid my friends would think I had lost my mind. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was mundane. I was walking to get lunch, scrolling through my phone, and I saw a video of a man in a war-torn country. He had lost his home, his business, and he was holding the body of his child. And he wasn't screaming in despair. He was weeping, yes, but he was saying, Alhamdulillah. All praise is due to God. He had nothing, yet he had everything. I had everything, yet I had nothing. That man possessed a peace that my six-figure salary couldn't buy. He knew something I didn't. He knew that this life is a temporary test, and that his patience was being recorded by a just God. He had an anchor. I was just drifting. I went home early that day. I locked the door. I had read about how Muslims pray, but I had never done it. I felt ridiculous. I felt vulnerable, but I knew I had to break the barrier. I washed my face, my arms, my feet, the ritual ablution. It felt like washing away years of cynicism. I stood on a small rug in my living room, facing east. I raised my hands and whispered, Allahu Akbar, God is greater. God is greater than my job, greater than my anxiety, greater than my ego. Then I went down to my knees and placed my forehead on the floor. You have to understand, in my world, you never lower your head. You stand tall. You project power. Putting your face on the ground is the ultimate act of humiliation for the ego. But the moment my forehead touched the ground, the dam broke. I wept. I wept like a child. It wasn't sad tears. It was the tears of a man who had been carrying a heavy backpack for 30 years and finally set it down. The noise in my head stopped. The constant, low-level hum of anxiety silenced. I felt small, and in that smallness, I felt incredibly safe. I realized I wasn't the general manager of the universe. I was just a servant, and that was okay. I stayed in that position for 10 minutes. When primera sate, up the room looked the same, but I was different. The void in my chest was filled. I took my shahaditha testimony of faith alone in that room, witnessed only by the angels. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. The next day, I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my personality. I was still me, but an upgraded version. I still worked in tech. I still loved coffee. I still laughed at bad jokes. But the lens through which I saw the world had shifted. When I stopped drinking, my mind cleared. When I started praying, my day gained structure and purpose. The rules I had been so afraid of weren't chains. They were guardrails. They kept me on the road. They protected me from the self-destructive habits that I thought were freedom. I used to wake up asking, what can I get from this world today? Now I wake up asking, what can I send forward for my afterlife today? I remember walking into a mosque for the first time a week later. I was terrified of being judged. Instead, a man I didn't know, a guy who looked like he had nothing in common with me, moved over to make space for me in the line. We stood shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot. The millionaire next to the janitor, the student next to the CEO, all bowing down to the same king. That brotherhood wasn't transactional. It was real. If you are listening to this, and you feel that subtle emptiness, that feeling that you are just consuming days until you die, do not ignore it. That is your soul starving. We feed our bodies 3 times a day, but we starve our souls for decades and wonder why we are miserable. You don't need to commit today. You don't need to change your name today. But you owe it to yourself to investigate. I challenged the Quran to prove it was false, and it proved me true. I dare you to do the same. Open the book. Read it without the filter of the media. You might just find the peace you didn't even know you were missing.